Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're listening from. I always say because you know the time zone around the world, and there are persons listening from Jamaica, USA, Canada, even Russia, even Cayman, Brazil, Denmark, UK. Data is showing that there are persons listening in their favorite podcast platform. And this is a wonderful episode because there's a lot to talk about. My guest today is somebody who has a lot of knowledge and a number of things. But look, we're going to be talking about Wagnerism and talking about how Richard Wagner and the Jewish situation. I'm not sure what my guest has to say. I did my research, but look, perhaps the Wagnerism has to do with the vehement um, suggestions of Richard Wagner as it relates to the Jewish imaginative discourse and expertise. I have done a bit of research on that, but my guest will clear that up a bit. He will also talk to us about the challenges that persons from the LBGTQ community has as it relates to health. He is said to be the first that had written about HIV back in the 80s. I can remember. It was a pandemic too, right? But each country deal with the epidemic in various ways. My guest is a medical doctor, a physician, basically, and he has a wealth of knowledge about a number of things, and we'll talk more about the scientific relationship with the HIV pandemic then. And don't even think about the COVID right now. It relates to science, right? But let's go back to the HIV AIDS pandemic. I will let my guest in, and we will talk some more. It's Lawrence Moss. Lawrence, how you doing, man?
Hello, Dr. White.
Nice to
Good
meet
to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for your wonderful program.
Thank you. You're welcome, Larry. Let's call you Larry. I
Yes,
like that. Larry, the shortening
please.
of Lawrence. In Jamaica, we do a lot of shortening of names as well. You know, it's perhaps sentimental. But look, Larry. Before I continue into the meat of the matter, so to speak, let's talk about who is Larry. You. Who are you?
Okay. Well, I think I'm sort of outside of my immediate community circles. I'm kind of best known as the first person to write about HIV/AIDS. That was back in early May of 1981. I wrote the first press report. And I am also a co-founder of Gay Men's Health Crisis, which was the first and still in many ways is the premier AIDS information and service organization. It's more than 35 years old, approaching 40 years old. And I did a lot of early writing in the press on AIDS that first year before it was really picked up and being covered by others. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also a writer. Let me just actually go back for a moment to my work in medicine. I began as an anesthesiologist. That was my training. That's what I did initially in my practice. And I went from there to work in addiction medicine. And it's there in work in addiction medicine that I got caught up in what I call community medicine. So there was a gay community that had no real health care of any kind. And likewise for the world of drug addicts, addiction treatment was very limited and very marginal. So I found a niche for myself in community medicine, and that was where I began doing my sort of independent writing. The early writing that I did on AIDS was for the gay press, because it wasn't really being picked up by the mainstream press. Even the more liberal mainstream press was it just was kind of invisible in that early period.
Okay.
So, and then I'm also a writer, and I write about culture. And one of my interests in culture has been I was an opera person,
Okay. Cool. Right.
and I was very in the world of opera. I found myself in this kind of unusual position. I had a favorite composer who was Richard Wagner, the great German
Hmm.
composer. But when I discovered the extent and seriousness of his anti-Semitism and the extent to which that world of Wagner is really rather cultish,
Right.
more and more questions emerged. And it ended up, in terms of my personal writing, I did a lot of journalism around health and AIDS and medical things.
Mm.
But at the same time, I was also doing personal writing, my own personal narrative. I wrote a memoir called Confessions of a Jewish Wagnerite, Being Gay and Jewish in America. And then more recently, the sequel to that book is a book called On the Future of Wagnerism,
Right.
Art, Intoxication, Addiction, Codependence, and Recovery. So the two of these together follow the narrative not only of my sort of personal life, and my kind of, experience as a minority person, both gay and Jewish, but also the related health issues that
Right.
I was involved in. Okay.
That's all right, because we are going. That's a good introduction of some of the things that we'll be talking about, Dr. Mas. But I asked my audience this. You might see it touching across the screen. Welcome to those of you listening on your favorite podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. Those watching and Canute Media. This is Canute Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I'm Dr. Canute White, talking with Dr. Larry Mas. But Larry, what your childhood was like? I ask all of my guests this.
Oh.
I cannot get away.
Well, that's great. Well, it's very pertinent because I was born and raised in the rural South, in the American South, in the heart of Georgia, in the mid 1940s. I'm 75 years old,
Okay.
and I was Jewish and queer. And in those days, queer wasn't anything that anybody ever talked about at all, ever. I mean, it was a completely hidden kind of thing. So I had no context of, as I was growing up. I knew I was somewhat different, but it was not something I had it wasn't until many years later, my father was a physician. I looked in his pathology textbook and found a little paragraph about homosexuality.
Yeah.
And, you never saw any discussion of any of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And there actually was a Jewish community in my area. They go back quite a bit and rather deeply in the South, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and that was a scary thing growing up. The queer thing just wasn't conscious, and I managed not to have much trauma about that. I kind of passed, but the Jewish thing was, being Jewish was scary. I mean, I would get in fights with kids and that sort of thing. But, I mean, I managed. I managed to the extent that when we moved north to Chicago in 1958, I was 11 years old, I cried because I had come to love my home, my homeland. And to this day, I still have rather deep attachments. So.
That's a childhood. Hey, Doc, you talk about the challenges with persons from the LGBTQ community, right? I read somewhere where you have suggested that there are setbacks in treatment, healthcare for this community. What do you mean by that? What type of setback?
Well, one of the best examples of this was actually a guest on your show. I'm sorry at the moment, I can't remember her name, but she she was speaking very eloquently about persons with disabilities. She had a congenital hip problem. that involved her personally, and then she became very involved in the whole world of disabilities and disability legislation. And she had a very strong conclusion and message on your podcast here.
Right, Shelley Olsen, right.
Yeah, exactly, which was that the world of disability considerations and services and legislation has been set back 30 years by her estimate in the current political climate. Well, in the current political climate, everybody's rights and, services, everything is being set way back. I mean, I don't need to tell you, what it's like a spectacle, right?
Right.
So at every level, racial, ethnic, gender, any minority you can think of, everybody is being pushed back, and set back.
Right.
I wouldn't even know where to begin. I mean, in the LGBT community, we still have, it was a huge struggle to get civil rights, which we finally got in New York City in 1987. That was, 6 years into the AIDS epidemic. It's now everybody's rights are once again threatened. Women's abortion, LGBTQ civil liberties, gay marriage, all these things that have shown themselves to be so helpful to people, and important in health and safety, are being, just destroyed.
Let me ask this, Doc.
Yeah.
I know that the LGBTQ community is a unique community within itself, right? And I'm sure that, like every other community sector like that, there are healthcare personnel, lawyers, who are part of these communities. Is it that, like you, there are practitioners who are lobbyists, a lot of lobbyists, and those doctors who persons from this community can go to get the proper health care? What's going on there?
Yes, I mean there are lobbyists, there are activists, and again, going back to the podcast with Shelley, there are lots of things that people can do individually that may seem modest to have an impact. It's very daunting. Now, that said, if we go back and look, in the early period of AIDS, here was this unfolding of this, incredibly huge, terrifying epidemic. We had very little organization. We had no civil rights. There were no civil rights for gay people. You could be fired. You could be kicked out of your family. All these things. These things were routine. So against enormous odds, we organized and we did what we could, and we ended up having a huge impact on everything, on our civil liberties status, on our integration into society, because there was a lot of people took individual initiative to get involved, do what they could in terms of demonstrations, protests, appearances on media. We had a first there was Gay Men's Health Crisis. That's the organization I was involved in, and that was spearheaded by Larry Kramer, this legendary gay activist and writer. And but not nearly enough activism was happening. So Larry actually went on to found this much more activist organization called ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. That was a remarkable organization that achieved monumental results. It is completely unprecedented, actually, in the history of grassroots healthcare activism. They achieved so much. But actually, that organization was Sarah Schulman, who is a historian of ACT,
Right.
was asked recently on a podcast in the New York Times. She was asked, "What was it how did ACT UP happen? How did it work?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said, there's a famous saying attributed to President Teddy Roosevelt.
Right.
And it's something that you hear also in the rooms of recovery, 12-step recovery, the Alcoholics Anonymous, the whole recovery movement. You don't have to be this great hero putting yourself on the line in every moment, in every situation. What each person can do is do what you can with what you have, where you are. That could be something as modest as making a phone call to a friend, writing a letter to a congressperson, making some effort to do something.
Right.
And there were in ACT UP when they originally organized. It was made up of people who they weren't necessarily activists, but they could each, some had skills in statistics, some had skills and knowledge in biological and medical research. All these people came together to it was housewives, mothers. There was a lot of really impressive street activism based on the American Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, very careful, very well done protests and demonstrations. Traffic was interrupted. It was very careful never to be violent.
Right, definitely.
There's a lot that can be done. And it starts with just your individual initiative.
Yeah, important, Doc. But let's talk a bit about your writings and see how best they blend into some of the things that you have been saying. This book about dialogues of the sexual revolution. Talk a bit about that.
Well, I have 5 books total. One of them is called "We Must Love One Another or Die: Life and Legacies of Larry Kramer." Larry Kramer is the great gay activist, gay writer, and co-founder, leader of both Gay Men's Health Crisis and ACT UP. These other 2 books that you're referring to, Homosexuality and Sexuality, and Homosexuality
these 2
as Behavior and Identity, they're part of I call the series Dialogues of the Sexual Revolution. So they're intended to give a panorama of how the best thinking about homosexuality and sexuality was developing and changing. It was going, it had been, at first it was religion that determined everything about sexuality, then it was psychiatry, and then there was this new level of branch of that was primarily sex research, sexology they call it. People specializing. Remember Masters and Johnson and Bell and Weinberg, the Kinsey Institute, the Kinsey Studies. These were major new studies about sexuality and health that modernized and gave us our current concepts of sexuality and homosexuality.
Right.
Sort of emerging from the dark ages. So I did a number of those books have interviews with psychiatrists, sex researchers.
Okay.
It also had the first volume there has a section called 5 interviews from the first 2 years of the AIDS epidemic. Okay. And it has the first interview anywhere with an AIDS patient who was confidential, didn't give his full name because he was in hiding. You couldn't admit anywhere publicly that you had HIV or AIDS, or you would be fired, you'd be kicked out of the family.
Interesting. Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's what those 2 books are. The Dialogues of the Sexual Revolution are collections, but they're interviews. It's a whole
they're interviews. They try to get a qualitative qualitative data, views and experiences of persons.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. This is Canute Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I am Dr. Canute White. You're listening, watching. me talking to Larry Mass, right? He's a lot of things. We're a lot of caps, right? But we're going to just touch on a number of these caps. But let us switch gear a little, Larry, and go into Wagnerism. What is Wagnerism? Let's go there a bit. I've done a bit of research, and
Well, this is the challenging question because, so in the world, a lot of people who are not opera people, they hear the word opera and they think, oh, well, let's see, Rigoletto, a lot of La Boheme, Italian singers, and I mean, people know some operas. It's just basically part of general culture.
Mhm.
They know about Wagner. I mean, if you've ever been to a wedding, or if you've been to
Yeah,
a bunch of weddings, you've heard "Here Comes the Bride."
right. Yeah.
That's from Wagner. That's from Lohengrin.
Oh, okay.
Wagner is one of the most important composers who ever lived, and he is one of the greatest composers who ever lived.
Hmm.
Very great composer. He was also ferociously anti-Semitic. I mean, quite a few people have been anti-Semitic. Famous painters, famous writers, famous, um, including other composers. But this is in a different realm.
Yeah.
And there's an endless debate about the extent to which this is reflected in his works, and I think the current level of scholarship is that it really does permeate the works. And Wagner, as one might have almost anticipated, was heartily embraced in a very big way by Hitler and the Nazis, by
Yeah.
Nazism, and the Wagner family. That
Yeah.
the home base of Wagner's operas. It's a small town in Germany called Bayreuth, where the Wagner family had its compound, and they were extremely involved with Nazi Hitler, all of them. There's no counterpart in the entire world of art and music and culture
Yeah.
to this situation. It is extremely disturbing. And it's something that in the world of opera, everybody kind of lives with because Wagner was so great a composer and was so important and had so much influence. But it's something that, I discovered in myself involved a lot of internalized anti-Semitism, a lot of sort of,
Okay.
lowering the bar on having questions and feelings and all of that. And I finally reached a point where I said, well, this is just really pretty uncomfortable for me. Now, I don't ban Wagner or
Right.
don't endorse bans on Wagner. I'm not really. I'm sympathetic with the ban that they have on Wagner in Israel because of the experience of people in the Holocaust. But that's not. I'm not a censorship or ban
Right.
person. I don't have. I can listen to Wagner. I still go to an
Yeah.
occasional Wagner performance.
And that's Richard Wagner.
Yes,
Richard
Wagner.
Wagner.
But it's no longer a comfortable. I thought of myself as a Jewish Wagnerite. That's something that is really uncomfortable for me. I don't know. I no longer consider myself a Wagnerite.
Yeah.
That's a world, a cultish world, and a troubled world that I really am ever more committed to distancing myself from.
I like that you have said that now.
I'm still there. I'm still knowledgeable. I still talk to people. I'm not afraid. I'm not crazy. It's a troubled business. And my thing is, I want to get the experience of somebody like me out there because there are a lot of Jews in the world of opera and Wagner. There's tons of us.
Okay.
But everybody has made this accommodation. All the others have kind of made this accommodation. Bad man, great art.
Okay.
And separate the two. It's great art. It's wonderful music. So everybody is okay with that. Okay, he was an anti-Semite. That's bad. We don't like it. But for me, I'm ratcheting up the discussion here at the level of saying, it's not just bad man, great art. It's really trouble for a Jewish person of consciousness and awareness to keep being subjected to this experience. I mean, we do it. You can do it if you want to. That's fine. But I want my experience, the extent of the troubles of it, to be better acknowledged.
Right. Tell me something that is the essence of Wagnerism, the sort of belief by Wagner that the Jews cannot do as they believe they can in terms of creativity.
Absolutely, absolutely. But there's another meaning of Wagnerism. There is no other ism in all of music and opera. Like, you don't say Mozartism, you don't say Verdiism, you don't say Bachism. This is the only one that has a huge cult phenomenon around it, okay? So it is a phenomenon of cultism to a real degree that also invites perspectives of addiction, intoxication, addiction, and codependence.
Right.
What are there? Yeah.
But tell me, is this issue dealt with? Second, what's going on with it?
Say again.
Is this issue of Wagnerism, right, in relation to the Jews? And
well, like I say, Jews are very integrated in the worlds of music and culture and opera and Wagner. But it involves this kind of negation of the extent to which these issues affect us. We kind of say, well, this is bad. If we're allowed to say this is bad, this is regrettable, but we're all on board with the greatness of Wagner, and we don't rock that boat. It's a little bit like in Black civil rights issues. People who present their concerns with a lot of dignity and that's okay. But when you get to major protests that where there's discernible anger, like Black Lives Matter, people don't want that.
Right.
Somebody like me is emerging as something like a Black Lives Matter kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where, it's louder and more intrusive than the custodians of music and opera and culture want to allow. They don't want to hear from them.
Yeah. Interesting, guys. You don't leave. You don't stop watching. Stop listening, because we have more coming for the next 15 minutes or so. Because there's a lot that Dr. Mas wants to talk about. And you're still listening to Canute Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I'm Dr. Canute White, talking with Larry Mas. Larry, this thing about Wagnerism and addiction, how that comes together, how that integrates.
Okay. Well, okay. So what happened was, I fell in love with a gay man. Right at me, another man, gay man, in the earliest period of AIDS. And I was at the height of my opera and Wagner stuff. I was really a hardcore opera person and Wagner.
Right.
And this person that I fell in love with was Jewish. I had never been in love with another Jew. And this is kind of a whole new experience. I brought him back to my apartment. There were 5 pictures of Wagner on the wall.
Okay.
He's a very likable guy. He died recently.
Okay.
We were together 40 years, and he had he was very tolerant, and everybody had a wonderful sense of humor. And he had some Wagner recordings in his own collection. He didn't have any, but he thought it was a little strange, this Jewish person having 5 pictures of Wagner, who was known to be all, was very much taken up by Hitler and Nazis and all of that. He said, he couldn't resist making a kind of joke about it.
Right.
And that was the
Yeah.
first time that I began to look at myself and recognize what in addiction work we call codependence.
Yeah.
Codependence is, you've heard of Al-Anon. Al-Anon is where people learn to live with alcoholics. Anyway, codependence is when you are doing something to kind of compensate for the, when something is not right or uncomfortable, you kind of compensate in other ways for it. So I think the troubledness of the Wagner situation was something that I was in love with that. I was compensating in ways that were kind of overkill in terms of my acceptance of Wagner and my regard for Wagner. I mean, even other Jewish Wagnerites, I don't know anybody else who had all these pictures of Wagner on the wall. I mean, it would be as if I can't think of it analogy, but if a black person had, some white artist who was known for his racism, on pictures on the wall,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Even if that person was a great artist and painter, if you knew that person to be an extreme racist,
Yeah.
So
So that was a sort of you're not you're offended by the Wagner pictures and
no, there's more to it than that. I'm a kind of intellectual. I'm a physician. I'm an observer of human nature. And in the outer world, there were things to kind of observe all the way from all around.
Right.
There is this cultism around Wagner. There's no other sort of festival that's remotely comparable to the Bayreuth Festival, where these works take place. There really is an atmosphere of cultism. So if you go to the Metropolitan Opera in New York and you see opera audiences can be very enthusiastic, they can be very rowdy.
Right.
But there is a different atmosphere in many Wagner performances. Wagner is notoriously kind of long, very long operas, like 6 hours. But you can go to a Wagner performance and not hear a single clock or candy wrapper crinkle for the entire 6 hours. There is an immersion, like an intoxication, like a hypnosis that goes on in Wagner performances.
Yeah.
That is just different in character from the others. Wagner invites a cult-like following. It's got many, if you talk to a whole range of Wagnerites, I mean, you won't come up with that much.
Right.
I don't have any absolute conclusions or advice or recommendations or anything from all of this. But I felt like, you know what you can do? You can tell your story and let the chips fall where they may. If nobody else has any ability to relate to my experience or my story, fine. Let it die there. But I have a feeling that there are more people like me out there who find this much more uncomfortable than it's generally found.
Yeah. Dr. Mas, very interesting. But I know that you had written a book, We Must Love One Another or Die.
That's the Larry Kramer book. Yes. Well, Larry Kramer is probably the most important figure in many ways in contemporary gay history. He was this very important gay writer, and he wrote, and gay activists and AIDS activists. He achieved enormously in these areas that he was involved with. Dr. Anthony Fauci from the NIH, world major involvement. Larry does a lot of stuff in the history of it. Fauci is one of his written on the pathway. But Dr. Fauci described, he said, you can talk about the history of medicine in America as before Larry and after Larry. That's how big an impact Larry had. The changes in thinking about medical research, disease control. I mean, he had a monumental input. Larry spent the last 30 years of his life writing an epic novel called The American People. It's 2 volumes. It's huge. It's sprawling. It's like, it's like about 1,500 pages altogether. There's 2,000 more pages that were edited out. And it's a real extraordinary insight of America's history, from slavery to America being, the inspiration in many ways for what happened to Nazis, Hitler, Germany, the eugenics movement that was here.
Right.
It's a satire. It's written as a kind of satire, like Gulliver's Travel or something like that. But it is a strong, epic look at America and its history and its values and its failures and its dangers.
Right. Doc, I'd like to talk to you about a very interesting topic, mixed-oriented relationships.
What?
Mixed-oriented relationships. Mixed-oriented relationships.
Oh, you mean like gay and...
Right, again, a straight person.
Okay.
Right, so to speak. Right, and this thing about thinking of the other partner. What happens is that a lot of time, either partner can be depressed. The gay partner or the heterosexual partner can be depressed because one partner has another orientation.
Well,
what do you think about that challenge?
Yeah, no, those are really wonderful questions, because that's the value of all the work that's been done in the modern period by the Kinsey Institute.
Right.
Researchers. What we've come to understand sexuality is much more complicated and varied than what we used to think. We used to think gay, straight, and nobody believed that bisexuality was real. Freud did, but a lot of people felt bisexuality was kind of fake identity that wasn't real. You were actually gay, straight, using gay, But we've come to appreciate bisexuality as, in many ways, set up for most people, and when there often is a preference, a stronger preference for one or the other, and so the whole business of sexual orientation, and it is complicated, and people react to the different and the unknown with fear and with defensiveness. I mean, it's always been the other. If somebody's a different race, a different religion, who are these people? What's the story? And that's what's very often the case with trans people.
Yeah.
They have very high murder rates. They're really because they arouse people don't understand who are these people, what are they doing, why are they doing. Well, there's been a lot of study of them, and there's been a whole world of medicine, a small world of medicine, set up to work with them and help them have the best lives that they can. All of that is set way back, these anti-trans initiatives, the laws, the Republicans are pushing, it's, again, it goes back to that other podcast that you did. Everything set back 30 years.
Right.
Same So, it's very try to work on understanding better these differences in people. People are not all the same. People are not all the same color. People are not all the same sexuality.
Yeah.
And there's slight differences. That doesn't mean that they're demonic or evil or something.
Yeah.
Or even mentally ill. It's just these are differences.
Yeah.
The term the one term that we use in talking about differences in sexual orientation, different kinds of different manifestations of sexuality, sexual variance. That's a term we don't hear too much anymore. That's a useful term. So it's a big, complicated, variegated world out there, and I think we're always best placed to appreciate and celebrate all these differences in people.
Yeah.
And not withdraw into these little isolated conflicts of race, sexual orientation.
Yeah, I appreciate how you put it. Yeah, it's very interesting, and it really speaks to the focus of acceptance, right? And that's critical. That's critical in terms of the acceptance, and I love the way you put it. I've never heard it been said like that before. Different races, so different sexuality, different mental challenges. So it's a matter of variation, and it must be a matter of acceptance. Hey, Doc, I'd like to have your contact if people would want to contact you. It will be in the episode. Sorry, in the description of this episode. Your contact. But if you'd like to say,
I have a website, lawrencegmass.com.
Okay.
LAWRENCEGMASS.com. So if somebody, and that has a contact option there, and also a overview of my books and some information about me, and so forth.
Okay, fine. And my audience will see those links that they can click on and get in touch with you. Hey, Doc, it's nice having you on Canute Exploration, your topic in a podcast. I'm Dr. Canute White. It's nice having you, Doc.
Thank you, Dr. White. It was an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So that was Dr. Larry Mass. He had a lot to talk about. I'm not sure we could perhaps have a part 2 one day. Who knows, right? But very interesting stuff that he had talked about. Wagnerism, the issue of healthcare for persons in the LBGTQ community, and he talked about his books. Very interesting books. Go find them, right? And get a read. Look at his website. You will be perhaps guided as to where to find those books. I'm sure you'll be guided as to where to find those books and to contact Dr. Mass. Very interesting person, nice person to talk with, and he has a wealth of knowledge and can guide you into some of the questions that you may have. Feel free to do that. This was Canute Exploration, your topic in a podcast. I am Dr. Canute White. Nice having you around. Stay tuned for the next episode. Subscribe, comment, rate. Thank you very much.